My name's Holden, enlisted infantry, 3rd Earth Expeditionary Division. 11 months into deployment. Sector Theta, outer ridge of the Zarnok front. Christmas 2319. My first away from Earth. No lights, no warmth, just another night of plasma. Fire and bone-deep cold. We'd been dug in along the crater lip, what the brass called the zero line. The Zarnok didn't care about the date. Their orbital shriekers hit us every few hours like clockwork. No warning, just a flash of burning sky, followed by soil turning into vapor. My squad, we were low on thermal packs, running on auxiliary power and nerves. Sarek, a supply runner from Recon Group Delta, showed up one day with thermal candles, micro power cells, and spare optics. He wasn't part of our regular unit, just passing through. Before he could leave, though, the worst thing that could have happened did: a shrapnel mine. Pressure triggered from some idiot stumbling near the wreckage of a tree. It caught him clean, took both his legs. Shrapnel punctured his lower abdomen, and the scream that ripped from his throat. It was loud enough to bring the drones in. We didn't have much time. We dragged him into the bunker. There was no medral, no stim patch, nothing. He begged for anything, for the pain to stop. We could only give him the cold comfort of silence. The order came soon after. Extract him to the Mobile Field Hospital 1.8 clicks west. The problem? We had no medevac, no drones, no carrier, just us, and the gravity of his wounds dragging us down with him. Only one of us had night vision that still worked. We started crawling. The Zarnok had thermal optics. Even in night cycle, their scouts could spot a body at a distance. They could see our heat like a flare in the darkness. And sure enough, not long after we started, mortar fire began to fall. Mortars that left no time to think, only time to run. Each blast made the ground shake and burn. My squad dropped flat between two fallen trunks. Sarek was barely conscious, his blood steaming against the frost. Every breath from him was a whimper of pain, a weak plea for us to move faster. But we couldn't. The Zarnok's mortars got closer. The ground around us was becoming a minefield of heat and fire. One blast landed so close it sent dirt flying across my face. The heat bled from the blast, hissing in the snow next to me. The trees above us? They were sliced in half by arcs of hellish fire. And Sarek? He was slipping. Each step we took in that frozen wilderness made him weaker. His sobs filled the air. The cold was taking him, but his screams were drowned out by the thrum of drones circling overhead. No matter how much we begged the universe for silence, we couldn't catch a break. We kept crawling. Over frozen roots, broken drone husks, and wreckage. Every step felt like a gamble. Every second counted. We were shadows in the dark, hoping to reach the extraction point. And when we finally did, we had only a few moments before the next wave of Zarnok came hunting. A hauler arrived, camouflaged, its hull burned black from past hits, still clinging to life in the face of every attack. A medic climbed out, scanning Sarek's condition. He nodded. No words, just nodded. "Thanks," he said before Sarek was loaded onto the hauler. "Merry Christmas." I didn't even register the words. I'd forgotten the date. I was too far gone to care. There was no tree, no lights, no family, just me, a few good men, and the coldest damn night I'd ever faced. Sarek's blood soaked my uniform, and my arms ached from the strain. But we didn't leave him behind, and as I watched that hauler disappear into the night, I felt something strange. Gratitude, not for warmth, not for safety, but for the absence of worse. For the fact that my wife wasn't here, my kids weren't here. I was the one carrying this burden, only me. We started heading back, slow, silent, just the sound of boots crunching on the frozen earth. The next round of Zarnok mortars hit us just as we got near our trench. We dropped low. I didn't flinch this time. The blasts were just noise. Now, no more fear, just a hollow sense of tiredness. Back in the dugout, I collapsed. My gear was soaked through, my fingers numb, but something felt different. I was cold. I was tired. My whole body was screaming, but I couldn't stop thinking about Sarek. the way he'd looked at me in those last moments. Like I was supposed to save him. Like I could. I couldn't. And maybe that's why the thought hit me so hard. I didn't need saving. Neither did Sarek. Not really. Because what we were doing in that moment wasn't about survival. It wasn't about escaping this hell we'd found ourselves in. It was about the fact that we didn't leave our own behind, even when there was nothing left to offer but the bitter cold of space and a battlefield that kept shifting beneath our feet. That's what makes us human. Our ability to keep moving when everything else says stop. When the odds are stacked so high against us it's laughable. We don't give up. We don't quit. And that's what made that Christmas different. Because we carried each other, even through hell, even when everything was stacked against us. That was the gift we gave each other. A promise that we wouldn't leave anyone behind. The next morning came slow. The sky, dark and cold, turned pale as the sun crept up. The frost-covered debris around us started to shine in a dull orange light. The fractured remains of a railgun frame caught the first rays of dawn, glimmering like shards of glass. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't about the mission. It wasn't about the war. It was about the people. It was about the ones we fought beside. The ones who didn't run. The ones who didn't turn their backs. Because that's the one thing the Zarnok would never understand. They thought they could break us. But the truth was, they didn't know us at all. We don't break, we just keep moving. Even through hell. We moved back into position after the extraction, the frozen wasteland around us carrying an eerie silence. The blast wave had left the air thick with smoke and dust, and the acrid smell of burning metal still lingered in the cold. The Zarnok hadn't stopped. They'd never stop. Every day was just a grind, a day where we traded our sweat, blood, and time for an inch of ground. And we had to fight for every damn inch. I stood watch on the ridge as the rest of the squad settled in. My body ached, every muscle screaming for rest, but I didn't let up. The adrenaline from last night had worn off, and all I felt now was the cold seep into my bones. Still, I kept my eyes on the horizon, scanning the shadows. You didn't survive long on the Zarnok front by trusting that silence meant safety. Sarek's face, pale and gaunt, kept flashing in my mind. He wasn't the first man we'd lost, but he might be the one that stuck with me the longest. I had been the one to drag him, his broken body feeling heavier with every step, every cry for mercy. That went unanswered, and I had no idea if I could carry that burden forever. The rest of the squad was already getting their gear ready, checking ammo and thermal batteries. We weren't going to get any downtime, not with the Zarnok still out there. It was just a matter of time before we were back in the dirt, staring death in the face again. And for all the cold, all the suffering, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in this fight for a reason. We didn't just fight to survive. We fought to prove something. Corporal Henshaw, my squad leader, snapped me out of my thoughts with a grunt. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. He pointed to the north, where the horizon had started to shimmer under the rising sun, the faintest traces of Zarnok activity stirring. "Get ready. We're not done yet," Henshaw muttered. It didn't take much for us to fall into formation. We were pros. We knew the drill. Henshaw took point, and I moved into the rear, always keeping an eye on our six. The rest of the squad filled in the gaps, each of us ready for the next hell the Zarnok would throw at us. The radio crackled in my ear, and I instinctively reached up to adjust the comm. "This is Captain Briggs," came the voice, cutting through the static. "Command reports significant movement on the East Ridge. Prepare to advance. This isn't a drill." I didn't need to hear more. We were already moving, our boots crunching in the snow as we moved out. The tension was thick in the air like static before a lightning strike. The Zarnok had been too quiet lately. That was never a good sign. We had to cross a narrow valley to reach the East Ridge, the only path that wouldn't get us shredded by their sensor grids. I hated that valley. Too many places for the Zarnok to hide. Too many angles they could strike from. But that's the war we fought. Risk, sacrifice, and death waiting just beyond the next bend. We barely made it halfway before the first shot rang out. The Zarnok had set up in a ridgeline above us, their high-powered plasma rifles flashing in the distance. They were well hidden, blending into the rocks like ghosts, but their fire was precise. A burst of green plasma whizzed past my ear, and I instinctively dropped into the snow, my rifle already in hand, returning fire. "Spread out! Take cover!" Henshaw commanded, and the squad dispersed in an instant, weapons raised. The fight was on. The Zarnok's plasma blasts lit up the snow, turning the valley into a chaotic firefight. The staccato of gunfire, the hum of energy blasts, the sharp cracks of high-powered rounds, it was all a blur of noise and violence. We pushed forward, digging in behind cover, trying to keep our heads down while the Zarnok poured fire into the snowbanks. I didn't think. I just reacted. A burst of plasma melted the rock beside me, and I fired back. I didn't care about tactics anymore. There was no plan. Just kill or be killed. A Zarnok scout popped up from behind a boulder, aiming, his rifle at one of our men. I didn't hesitate. My rifle bucked in my hands, the sound of it deafening in the chaos. The Zarnok dropped, one down. Another Zarnok appeared on the left, but I wasn't fast enough this time. A plasma bolt tore through the air, grazing my shoulder, sending pain, shooting through my body. I cursed, but there was no time to stop. The blood soaked into my uniform, and I could feel the sting of it, but I pushed it aside. Pain was a given here. Everyone was hurt. No one cared. We pushed forward. The Zarnok were attacked, their fire coordinated and well-aimed. I couldn't afford to slow down. Every second felt like it might be my last. The squad kept moving, covering, each of us more determined than the last to get the job done. When we finally reached the ridge, the fight slowed, but it didn't stop. The Zarnok had retreated, regrouping further up the valley. They were smart, too smart. They knew we'd chase them. They knew they had the advantage of terrain. "Keep moving!" Henshaw shouted, leading the charge as we climbed the ridgeline, the snow crunching under our boots. I kept my rifle aimed ahead, scanning for any sign of movement, and then we saw it. The Zarnok were dug in. There was no question about it now. They weren't running. They were preparing for something bigger. It was a trap. A goddamn trap. The orders came through my earpiece. Move in, take the ridge, clear the area. But as we advanced, something in the air changed. The Zarnok weren't retreating. They were setting us up for something far worse. I could feel it. As we climbed higher, the smell of smoke and burning metal hit me. The Zarnok were using more than just conventional weapons now. They'd upgraded, learned from us, and that was the one thing we never anticipated. They weren't just using mortars. They weren't just using plasma. They had something new. A roar split the air. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and I realized what it was. The Zarnok had deployed a war machine. Something massive. Something built for destruction. A behemoth of metal, a thing that could level our entire squad in a matter of seconds. I had no time to think. "Get down!" Henshaw screamed. But it was too late. The war machine fired, and the world erupted into chaos. The roar of the Zarnok war machine was deafening, a mechanical beast designed for destruction. It loomed over the ridge, a massive spider-like construct, with glowing energy nodes and spiked legs that tore through the snow with terrifying speed. I barely had time to react before the first shot landed, an energy blast so powerful that the ground beneath my feet cracked and shattered. The explosion sent a shockwave through the air, and everything around me seemed to turn into a blur of dust and fire. My body hit the snow, hard. I couldn't breathe for a moment, the force of the blast knocking the wind out of me. My ears rang. For a second, the world went silent, and I could only hear the frantic beating of my heart. The only thing that mattered now was survival. Get up. Keep moving. I pushed myself up, my hands covered in snow and blood, and instantly scanned the battlefield. The rest of the squad was scattered, taking cover behind rocks, debris, and any available structure. Henshaw was already on his feet, shouting orders, trying to keep everyone alive. "Form up! We hit that thing hard!" Henshaw's voice cut through the chaos. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He knew exactly what needed to be done. The Zarnok war machine let out another roar, firing again, and the blast went wide. We weren't its target. Not yet. But that wouldn't last. It was adjusting. Its sensors were zeroing in on us. Grenades! Now! Henshaw ordered. I reached for the grenade belt strapped to my chest, grabbing two in quick succession. I didn't have time to think. I knew the odds were slim, but we had no choice. We had to fight. We had to make them bleed. The war machine's spiked legs dug into the ground as it pivoted, its massive energy cannon turning toward us. The squad was already advancing, pushing forward, using whatever cover they could find. There were only a few of us left, 5 men, who'd made it this far. The rest had either been blasted apart or pinned down. I took aim, hurling the first grenade with everything I had. It arced through the air, exploding against the machine's armored body. A burst of bright green light flashed on impact, but the machine barely slowed. Another shot rang out, a bolt of pure energy that hit the ground near my feet, sending me tumbling. "Fall back," I heard someone yell. I didn't wait. The war machine was too powerful. We weren't ready for this. But we couldn't give up. We couldn't let it win. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. The rest of the squad was already falling back, retreating to the only cover we had left. The ridgeline. The Zarnok machine didn't care. It had us pinned. Another grenade. I threw it with everything I had, praying for a miracle. This one hit its side, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of vulnerability. But it wasn't enough. The war machine's cannon powered up, charging for another blast. The entire squad was running now, a blur of motion, desperation in every stride. The snow beneath our boots was slick with blood, and every step felt like it could be our last. Then, out of nowhere, a crackling voice broke through the static in my earpiece. "This is Bravo Team," the voice said. "We've got a shot. Prepare for reinforcements." I didn't know who was on the other end, but the relief hit me like a wave. Bravo Team wasn't far, and if they were coming, they'd be bringing firepower. "Our only shot at surviving this mess. Hold your positions," Henshaw shouted. "Bravo's coming in hot!" The Zarnok war machine didn't stop. It unleashed another blast, sending chunks of rock and ice flying in every direction. I ducked behind a boulder, heart hammering. The thing was closing in. It was almost on top of us. I glanced over my shoulder. Bravo Team's reinforcements were close now, their massive dropships roaring overhead. The sound of their engines rattled the ground, a deafening screech that almost drowned out the sound of the war machine's gun charging up again. We had to move, or we'd be wiped out. There was no time to wait. "On me!" Henshaw bellowed. We sprinted, all 5 of us running toward the ridge. The war machine fired, but we were already gone, diving behind the last remnants of cover. We had nowhere else to go. It was now or never. Just as the Zarnok machine adjusted its aim, the first of Bravo's rockets slammed into the beast's flank. The explosion was thunderous, shaking the ground beneath us. For a moment, the war machine paused, its systems rebooting. It faltered, and that was all we needed. "Hit it! Hit it now!" Henshaw roared. I didn't hesitate. I took aim at the Zarnok machine's weak spot, the energy core exposed from the blast. One shot. That was all it would take. My rifle kicked back as I fired. The shot went true, slamming into the core with all the force I could muster. The energy feedback was immediate. The Zarnok machine screeched, its entire body shaking as if it were being torn apart from the inside. The core exploded with a massive flash of light, sending debris and fire in all directions. I didn't see what happened next. Everything went white. The world was a blur of noise, heat, and smoke. My body slammed into the ground and everything went dark. I woke up minutes later, my body battered but alive. The sound of battle had stopped, replaced by the eerie quiet that followed the destruction. The war machine was gone. Nothing but smoldering wreckage remained. "We did it." Henshaw's voice came through the fog of my consciousness, but we lost half the squad. I turned my head slowly, my body protesting with every movement. The remains of our team were scattered across the field, bodies broken and bloodied. But we had survived. We had made them pay, and I felt it. The weight of what we'd just done, the toll of the fight. This wasn't a victory, it was survival. As I stood, my legs unsteady, I glanced around at the men left standing. We were all scarred, physically, mentally, but we were still here, still alive. We carry each other, I muttered to myself, the words bitter on my tongue. Didn't know if I could ever go home. I didn't know if I'd ever get to see Earth again, but I knew one thing. We are the soldiers of Earth, and we would never stop fighting. Enjoy another amazing story. She was pushing through the crowd when she first saw the sudden movement as the Horpos fell. Charlie had been returning from a discussion about her dissertation with her professor and had just gotten off the hypertram when she saw the jostling in the crowd ahead and the parting of bodies. Disturbances and unexpected sights weren't all that uncommon here. Serum had become the de facto center of galactic politics thanks to being a habitable world nearly at the dead center of the Milky Way. It was a large enough planet, with a sufficient range of biomes to accommodate a surprising majority of sentient species from across the stars. The entire planet was bustling, with trillions of souls packing every layer of the city that spanned its entire surface. Charlie had been excited to earn a position in the graduate program of history at Centrum U North. Despite some setbacks, her thesis on the underlying factors of the fifth multi-world conflict was going smoothly. But all that was forgotten as she moved through the crowd of aliens of all shapes and morphologies to see what had happened. The crowd had simply parted around the fallen Horpos, like a river around a rock midstream. A few paused to glance down at the form before proceeding on. The connecting line for the hypertram to take her the rest of the way to her apartment was across the street, but Charlie ignored the gentle beeping of the indicator that it was safe to cross the maglev rails and knelt down by the fallen alien. The Horpos was a quadruped, somewhat resembling a horse from Earth, but covered in thumb-sized scales, with feet ending in tri-pointed claws rather than hooves. The figure was wrapped in clothing worn and tattered at the edges, with spots of dirt and grime suggesting they had not been able to wash it in some time. Despite knowing next to nothing about their physiology, something in Charlie's gut told her something was seriously wrong. She knelt by the alien's head, running her hand along the top of it and murmuring, "It's all right. I'm here. I can help." The creature flinched for a moment before relaxing slightly, though its breathing was still rapid, tight, and ragged. It didn't appear to have any atmosphere filters or supplemental apparatus, so the breathing difficulty seemed out of place. Charlie reached into her pocket with her free hand, freeing her comm slate and quickly dialing the medical response icon. The icon brought up a quick form, which she filled out as best she could before submitting, but many of the questions, such as the creature's sex or age, she had to leave blank. She submitted the form, and her heart plummeted when she saw the estimated arrival time, nearly an hour and a half. A sound of laughter and celebratory music caught her attention from a catwalk above. She glanced up to see revelers of the Isu Festival of Plenty were waving streamers and blowing on gratingly loud celebration horns. The festival was a popular one, with millions of others in this part of the city world alone crowding the streets, and mag tracks. Charlie suspected this was the main reason for the long delay. The Horpos made another noise, a sound of pain and distress. Its eyes were wide, looking in all directions but unseeing as it spasmed again. The crowd continued to part around them as if they were made of stone. A hand touched Charlie's shoulder, causing her to start. It was quickly followed by an apology as the old man said, "Sorry about that." It was another human, an uncommon sight, on Centrum. He was clad in the bland, barely adequate common coat and outerwear that Centrum provided for those who had nothing at all, similar, she noticed, to what the Horpos wore. The material was thin, and she could see the man shivering in the cold, but he ran a hand down the creature's neck. There, it'll be all right." He looked up at Charlie and murmured, "Name's James. I used to be a horse doc, large animal, vet once upon a time. I don't think it's quite exactly the same," he muttered with a dark chuckle, glancing down at the alien. "But I've got some ideas of what to check." He cleared his throat and spoke softly to the alien, the gravel in, his tone almost gone as he said carefully, "Sir or ma'am, or whoever you are, I'm going to try checking a few things. Let me know if you feel any more pain." He began gently palpating the creature's hide, careful to pause whenever there was any motion or sound from it. Finally, at one point on the creature's chest, a gentle push resulted in a muted screech, and James threw up his hands, saying, "Oops, sorry. Okay, I think we know where the problem is. Damned if I know exactly what's wrong, though. I would say it might be a liver blockage, but on a critter like this, it's not the liver. It's something more akin to our lower intestine." Another voice had spoken, causing Charlie to look up in surprise. It was another human, this one a young adult in an expensive-looking gold-accented business suit, clearly passing through on their way to the economic district. "We lived next to a Horpos family growing up," they said by way of explanation. "Unfortunately, it's called a pollen-dyer organ and is fairly prone to blockages in old age. It's usually fatal if it can't be treated promptly. Here, let me contact an emergency med team." Charlie chuckled bitterly. "I already submitted a request. The wait time is over an hour. I think the festival traffic is gumming things up." The new arrival smiled, tapping a merchant crest band on their wrist. "Yes, but we can't have a private medical team here in half that time." The Horpo's breathing had become shallower, with great effort taken for each breath. As the business person knelt to help James massage the side of the blockage as best as they could, they murmured, "My name's Morgan. I was just on my way through but happened to catch sight of you three." They glanced around at the continuous stream of aliens walking past, some stepping over the legs of the human or the fallen Horpos without a word or comment. "How can they all just walk by?" Charlie shrugged. "I don't know, but I'm at least glad that you two decided to stop." The Horpos shuddered and went still for a moment. Charlie's heart skipped a beat, fearing the worst had happened. But then the Horpos tried to lift its head before letting it droop weakly. It began speaking in a whispering voice of whinnies and grunts, but unfortunately it was a language Charlie didn't speak. "Do any of you understand that?" she asked. The other two shrugged and grimaced. "Sorry," Morgan said. "I don't." James shook his head. "No idea what your name is, but we're here to help." "Her name is Blossom of the Tall Root." "Tree," came a firm voice. Charlie looked up and couldn't stop herself from gasping. The speaker was a woman, another human, but wearing the uniform of an officer of the Martian Federation, something that instinctively set Charlie's heart racing. Her own mother had been killed on deployment during a skirmish against Martian forces, one of the many that had plagued the Civil War still raging in some sectors of what was once unified human space. In fact, that fractiousness had caused humanity to be denied an official seat at the Unified Alliance, the Civil War deemed a sign of humanity's brutal nature, at least according to the politicians. Years earlier, Charlie had been overjoyed, just to have been extended an invitation to Centrum U North, as admittance rates for non-members of the Alliance was woefully low. The Martian officer must have noticed Charlie's stiffened posture. Her voice softened slightly as she explained, "I studied Horpos at the academy, one of several languages I ended up picking up and remembering more than a few words of." She leaned down and began murmuring back to the Horpos in the same language. The low whinnies and grunts sounded as though they would be painful for a human throat to produce, but Charlie could see they had the intended effect. The Horpos relaxed and stilled, though its breathing became more and more shallow. "I don't know if there's anything else to be done," said James. Next to him, Morgan nodded. "I don't think it's long now," James said quietly, and the others didn't need to ask what he meant. The soldier knelt and began murmuring the same phrase in the Horpos language. Charlie whispered, "What are you saying?" The soldier let out a slight chuckle. "The same words humans heard when we found out there was this whole gathering, just a few kiloparsecs away. You are not alone. You are not alone. We're here with you." Charlie nodded, and after a moment, did her best to copy the soldier's voice and tones, smiling slightly at the nod of approval she received. Meanwhile, Morgan, in a quiet tone barely audible over the background bustle and roar of the city, said softly, "I don't remember the words for it, but I do remember that when the family next to us had their first foal, they sang a lullaby. I think I still remember how it went." They began to hum a slow, staccato tune, and after a few bars, James joined in, adding a deep bass note to the song. Charlie continued repeating the Horpos phrase a few more times before joining the humming, adding a bit of harmony, hoping it was appropriate. Something in her gut told her it felt right. The soldier continued speaking in Horpos, and a few minutes passed. Then, the soldier fell silent, as did James. The Horpos had gone still, its breathing absent, its body warm but unmoving. James leaned forward, feeling around for a pulse, guided by Morgan, who pointed to a thinner area of scales at the base of the neck. A few moments later, he shook his head. "I'm afraid she's gone." No one said anything. There was nothing more to be said. Instead, they all waited, cradling the fallen alien until the glare of the private medical unit's lights arrived minutes later. At Morgan's insistence, they checked the body, and after a few moments, the still form of the Horpos was loaded into the transport and whisked away. The humans stood quietly, unspeaking, as the flow of aliens around them remained unchanging and unceasing. Charlie took a long breath, hearing it hitch in her own throat. The old man stepped forward, giving Charlie a hug, and she sobbed into his shoulder. Morgan stepped forward as well, a bit hesitantly, giving them a squeeze around the shoulders before warming to the embrace. As Charlie wiped her eyes, she noticed that the soldier had also turned her face down, standing apart, but Charlie could see the glint of tears on her face. She reached out, grabbing the soldier softly by the arm and pulling her into the huddle. They stood there for what felt like hours, though it was likely only a minute or two, before the soldier was the first to pull away, clearing her throat, wiping her eyes and saying, "I have to be on my way." Before she could start walking away, though, Morgan caught her arm and passed her a business card. "Just reach out to me, and I'll let you know what the medical unit was able to determine about contacting her family." The soldier nodded and looked at all of them before her gaze locked on Charlie. In her eyes, Charlie saw an echo of the same haunted sorrow she had glimpsed in her own mother years ago. The soldier said, "Thank you," and "I'm sorry," before striding away into the crowd. The rest of them dispersed, and Charlie made her late connection on the hypertram back to her apartment, still clutching Morgan's business card in her hand. She hoped that whoever the Horpos was, they knew that their final moments had been as comfortable as possible, and in the presence of someone, anyone, who cared. Master Gunnery Sergeant Sonata adjusted her uniform, brushing off what she thought might be minuscule specks of dirt before nodding to the generals flanking her. She felt woefully out of her depth, having been told that rather than serving as an advisor to the Martian delegation at Centrum, she had been requested to take part in some diplomatic proceedings that morning. Politics had never been her strength, but she wasn't one to disobey orders, so she marched alongside the officials who heavily outranked her as they entered the United Alliance Assembly Hall. The hall was vast, with thousands of seats and rows filled with beings of all shapes and morphologies. There was a constant quiet buzz, the murmur of hushed voices, respirators, and 1,000 other small pieces of electronics and equipment. The central discussion plinth ahead caught Sergeant Sonata's eye. While she was unsurprised to see the officials, diplomats she had learned were some of the heads of the Unified Alliance, what truly caught her attention was a species she had never seen on the platform before. It distracted her enough that she almost missed noticing the Nations of Earth delegation already standing there, the primary group in opposition to the Martians' successful bid for independence and freedom within the swath of human-controlled worlds. What captured Sonata's attention, though, was the new alien on the platform, a Horpos. The alien's skin had a somewhat different coloration from the one she had seen a few nights earlier, but it was still similar enough to surprise her. It was this Horpos who began the remarks. Gentle whinnies and growls were automatically translated by the hall's equipment, and Sonata heard the voice ring out clearly. "Once our people roamed the grass and fields, and only knew each other, before we reached the stars and found so many others out there. But despite being surrounded by so many lives, so many species, we have felt the loss of our herd in our travels and dealings with the other races of the stars. But not 10 cycles previous. That changed. My grandmother passed away, taken to return to the infinite veldt. but she did not die alone. Despite being surrounded by thousands of other races and billions of other individuals, none of whom even knew her name, she did not die alone. Specifically, she did not die alone because a human was there, several of them, and they comforted her, regardless of their own needs, desires, or divisions as she died. So, we make this formal request now. With the Horpo's endorsement, humanity should be given an equal seat in the Alliance. We believe that despite whatever may temporarily divide them, the Alliance as a whole will be strengthened by the compassion that unites them. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.